You're now live.
We are now live. This is Senate Finance. Today is the 20th, my grandson's 14th birthday. And also Nolan Langwheel's birthday, we found out this morning from Joint Fiscal. We are going to continue our discussion today, or start it for this year, with finding out what's been going on since we left with broadband. And Christine Hallquist is with us. Christine, congratulations. I think, after you may disagree after you've been on that job for so long, but being named to head the board and be the director, and we'll look to you to fill us in on what's been happening since we went home with broadband. We put a whole lot of money and committees and CUDs in play, and we just need to find out what's happening.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for your time, and thanks for all the work the legislature has done on this really important issue that we've been working on for a couple decades in the state. But I will say, yes, I started in July, and the first 6 months were a little rough because it was basically Rob Fish and I. But I'm proud to say we got a really nice staff. We brought on an attorney, Stan Masel from Securities Exchange Commission, very talented. And we got a way overqualified executive assistant with GIS skills, Alyssa. So we're having fun now because we work with good people and intelligent people, and you can get a lot done. So I'll give you an update on where we are.
So.
Okay. Can you see the
Yes.
presentation? Excellent.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think my goal is to get through this 20-25 minutes to give you plenty of time for questions. But I think we all know the role of the Vermont Community Broadband Board, since you were the ones that set it up. I will say, you look at universal service, the resources for the CUDs, the grants for the construction and pre-construction program, partnerships, allocating the state aid to make it go as far as possible. And what we're working on now is, of course, addressing workforce and material shortage. I'll talk more about that. And identifying more areas of opportunity. I will say one of the things I want to compliment both, that the work of the legislature on is the idea of putting this under the DPS. As you remember, my early testimony was that I thought it should be a separate organization, but the wisdom of the legislature in putting this under the DPS really has saved us significant time. I can't imagine doing this any other way. The DPS has been a great partner to work with. I really appreciate all the advice and support that June Turney's been giving us. So we had our kickoff in August. We've met with the telecom. I would say most of the telecom. I can't imagine the telecom, but there was a few, one or two we haven't yet been able to talk to just for scheduling, but certainly most of Vermont's telecom providers. The CUD districts we're meeting with regularly. The good news is Vermont's ahead of the curve. And I want to say it's really important for us to stay ahead of that curve because, with the material, when I talk about material, we were able to save significant money, like 30% on material by staying ahead of the rest of the curve. The entire country, with the billions of dollars that's being invested in broadband, it's going to be like a whale watch, right? Everybody's going to run over, try to get all the material, get all the labor. And we've already seen the inflationary pressures that have occurred because of supply chain issues. These supply chain issues are going to be even more intense in terms of telecom. So at times people complain about Vermont being ahead of the curve and things. In this particular case, it's going to save us money and will be more effective. We're, as I talked about, we're staffed up. We're still going to add a broadband project developer. We're out looking for one right now. That broadband project developer, their role is going to be to mine for other finance sources. Help the CUDs apply for different grants that are out there available beyond what the Broadband Equity Access and Development Program has, or deployment program. We've contracted with outside partners. We kicked off our GIS support. We're building GIS mapping and reporting so that our goal on the GIS side is that a Vermonter can click and see when they're going to get broadband, with when it's planned, and of course when it's actually deployed. We want to be able to give Vermonters the ability to see the progress of the construction, as well as compare that to the plan versus actual, classic project management. And we're working hard with the CUDs to share resources. We're developing some relationships with philanthropic organizations in terms of workforce development, and other organizations that already have programs that are up and running. Certainly wherever CUDs can help each other, we've been encouraging that. And we've also been encouraging, and I'll talk more about that, partnerships with telecom providers. So the status, we've issued a $21 million in pre-construction grant. 7 of the 9 CUDs so far are in the design stage and make ready, preparing for construction in 2022. And in that vein, one of the key things that we recognized early on was that we're going to have a hard time getting materials. If you look at fiber optic lead times are running out as much as a year. So thanks to the work of Rob Fish and the team, they managed to secure 2,000 miles of fiber, and that fiber is going to be delivered to the job sites, but we don't need to warehouse it. It's being it contracted all the way back to the manufacturing to get the manufacturing output, and that on a $6 million saved $2 million. So by purchasing it this year, we're able to purchase it at 2021 prices and use it in 2022, and the prices have gone up significantly since then. We've approved outside design standards, and we've just issued an RFP for $116 million. You'll see the press release came out today. So we're now taking applications for the construction program in 2023. We're addressing the workforce and labor needs are big. We think we'll probably need about 200 additional technicians in Vermont. We've been working with the Department of Labor, Agency of Commerce and Community Development. We're working with the Vermont Business Roundtable. We're working with the college system, Vermont Technical College. We're working with the utilities. We're working with national organizations such as the Fiber Broadband Association and the New England Public Power Association to build a program. And the program isn't just to develop fiber technicians. It's to develop career paths for people who are in low or no income positions or the marginally employed to be able to get into the workforce. If you look at our workforce issues today, and I like to, and whenever I get a chance, I'm going to do it here, I like to remind people that back in 1990, I spent 3 days at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where we studied workforce issues, and these United States workforce issues were predicted back then. Harvard Kennedy School of Government was saying, 2020, absent a baby boom, we're going to have labor shortages. So the labor shortages across the sectors are a result of the demographics of the United States, the aging demographics and people leaving the workforce. And of course, Vermont has the oldest demographic. So we already went into this COVID crisis with a shortage. It creates a significant problem for us, but it also creates significant opportunity if we do this right, because we can provide career paths for people that may not have had career paths before. So I'm excited about the broad opportunity that this workforce development presents. And we're leveraging additional funding. We're looking at other grant sources for funds as well as philanthropic courses. But the basic model is, the grant fundings and donations provide the initial funding. The CUD builds its infrastructure. They are partners. All the CUDs are operating with partners who, telecom partners who are in business to do this today. The operator provides a service. the CUD will access the revenue bond market to complete the build out of the district. If we look at today with what the governor suggested in his address, as well as what's existing today, we've probably got somewhere around 300 million for a project that's going to cost somewhere north of 500 million. So we're going to have to go to the bond markets, and the more borrowing results in higher consumer prices. So when we talk about affordability, it's one thing to get everybody connected, but if it costs $120 a month to be connected, that's not within the range. And I'll quote some of the work that was done by FX Flynn, in terms of the work they see. They see that those people who can afford to get connected are connected today, right? Those people who aren't connected are the ones that are in the lower income brackets or the no income brackets. So we really, these grants are important to drive down the entry cost. So today, I think we've got a real success story here. We've got 9 CUDs, and there's 2. I think that number is even higher now, but we're actually adding a couple, a town or 2 a week. We're at 202 towns out of 251. Over 400 volunteers working across the state. We're addressing over almost 2/3 of the state population, and we're addressing 91% of the premises that don't have access. And the CUDs have put together an association, and it's made it much more efficient for us to work with the association itself, rather than try to pull every other CUD together. For our board, they had to jump on a moving train, and this was a fast-moving train, as you're probably well aware. So we've had limited time for board policy development or training. That's on the agenda for this year, to get the board policies in place and the training. But the key for the board, from the date they started in August, was get the funds out for pre-construction, get the funds out for detailed design, and now we're scrambling to get the funds out for construction. The other thing was developing the design standards, the RFPs. It's been very busy. Normally, if we start up a board, you would develop the board policies and you develop the training. If we had taken the time to do that, that takes about a year. We couldn't afford to do that right off. So the good news is we've a highly skilled board, highly skilled professionals that we're able to jump right in. As I said before, we were understaffed. We're certainly in better shape now. And of course, Vermonters naturally are impatient. And everywhere, when I say everyone everywhere is exploring broadband, I'm talking about across the country. We are actively involved in the State Broadband Leaders Network. And personally, that's been a very good resource. We meet regularly with the state broadband leaders across the country to compare notes and address challenges. So we're responding to the interests of the CUDs and the non-CUD towns and other eligible providers. Has been a lot of work. There's a lot of interest in telecom from both the private and the public interests. Developing a universal service plan for non-CUD towns that are operated by one or more telephone companies. We're going to call that wire centers. When I talk about wire centers, if you look at the way Vermont is wired today, we pretty much follow utility lines for electrical. And so, it's not as clean as you have towns. Sometimes a town is served by 2 or 3 different electric utilities or 2 or 3 different telephone or telecommunication utilities. But I think we've worked through all that. I talked about affordability. One of the challenges we're going to be talking about, and we don't have an answer yet. I did submit a legislative report, and Senator Cummings, I sent you the report Saturday night, so make sure you check your email. But we're talking about the fact that one of the challenges we have is the fact in the Act 71 in 2 locations, it says in the event, I like to say in the unlikely event of a CUD failure, the assets would be returned to the state. That becomes problematic to bonding agencies and financing institutions. So we're trying to work up some language to solve that issue.
Okay.
I'll keep going here. As I talked about the two of those challenges, access to material and labor, access to capital, we're unfortunately, when we talk about access to capital, we don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound greedy because we've got a lot of funding here. We've got the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Act as well as ARPA, but there's also other money we could access in the NTIA program, but unfortunately they require a comparative audit, and there's only one CUD, NEK Broadband, that's able to come up with that comparative audit, meaning you have to compare 2 years of audit results. The good news is NEK is our largest CUD, and they are pursuing the NTIA program. But next year, we will be able to pursue some of those NTIA dollars. So, when we talk about the challenge to capital, the CUDs are startups. So, if you're a functioning organization, you've got a demonstrated performance over time, you don't need to borrow as much money. So I'll harken back to my my Vermont Electric Co-op days. We even had a bylaw at Vermont Electric Co-op said we will always keep a 40% equity position. That was the ideal place, meaning you always you never borrowed more than 60% of the value of your assets. In the case of a startup, you can't borrow any more than 40% of the assets. So when you talk about 300 million versus 550 million costs, that is a good sweet spot, but we can't drop below that because that'll get in the way of borrowing. I'm saying just to clarify, the Reconnect, the NTIA program that I'm talking about, the access funding, Reconnect is a subset of the national. NTI is the organization, Reconnect is the program. Anybody taking notes, so not to confuse you. With the material purchases, the way we got around that, and thanks to the help of the Vermont Community Foundation and VSCCU, we were able to provide letters of credit that helped these CUDs pre-purchase the materials. We're also asking that, we're exploring the possibility of the towns using some of their ARPA funds to match. We could have the towns using their ARPA funds to expedite broadband, for example. They could be building conduit into their infrastructure using their ARPA funds, which would significantly reduce the cost of broadband, because part of broadband is getting the poles ready and making ready. If we had I'm laughing because I just got a note that it's the USDA that's doing the Reconnect program, not the NTIA. I apologize for that. So anyway, we're encouraging the towns the CUDs to seek matching from the town in their ARPA funds. We're not sure how that's going to work because we recognize that towns have water, sewer, and other competing challenges. One of the key items to talk about here is once we start constructing, it's important to keep things moving. The last thing you want to do is stop constructions. I'm pretty confident that the legislature everybody recognizes that we have to have continuous cash flow in order to guarantee continuous construction. But if you ever stop construction, you'll never get those crews back because they're going to go somewhere else. So once we start, you want to keep the rhythm of construction going for the next 5 years. Our material lead times are increasing. Hopefully that fixes itself over time as manufacturing capacity comes up to speed. The large established providers have distributors that and a history of purchasing. Our CUDs didn't, which is why it was really important to have the help from the Vermont Community Foundation and VSCCU. We were able to work with a large supplier and build the manufacturing capacity long term. The ARPA, another point to make, one of the things that we crossed when we were going these material purchases, the ARPA program requires domestic procurement of materials. There are, companies from India and China that can provide fiber. and you may have heard, through your musings with your constituents that, hey, there's fiber available from XX corporation. Well, XX, that can be purchased in 12 weeks. Well, XX corporation is likely from India or China. We've explored all the domestic suppliers. So on the labor side, I talked about the need for the 200 technicians. Fiber technicians are required 144 hours of classroom training and then 2,000 hours of apprenticeship, meaning they have to work with an existing employee for a year. So that puts pressure on the existing telecom companies to take on these additional resources. We've gone out and done a survey with the regional construction companies, regional meaning New York State and New England, and there is a limited supply of technicians. So now we're reaching out beyond the region to look at what we can get across the country for help, because the idea is we need to have these apprenticeship programs before these fiber technicians can work independently. Let's get them trained during 2022 instead of by 2023. We have Vermonters doing these jobs. This make-ready work, preparing the poles for the fiber, that is going to put pressure on the electric utilities. I'm really happy with the partnership we received from the electric utilities. I can confidently say with our work with utilities that we have enough labor, we have just enough labor resources to get it done. Now, good project management experience says you build in a 30% contingency for ups and downs that go on with your labor and your materials. We don't have contingency here. We've worked with utilities. We have enough labor in order to do the make ready, but we can't afford a hiccup. This needs really good project planning, which we will be doing and are doing. So here's a quote. Hopefully you have this package. I won't read through this whole quote, but essentially it says, we're facing a crisis. What if I had $1 million? Personally, I'd buy $1 million of fiber and put it in a warehouse right now, because you're not going to lose. You're going to make a lot of money doing that. There's so much pressure going on between the RDOF program, the CARES program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the ARPA program. Nationwide, we've got the pressures put on this system. And we all remember what happened with toilet paper. So
that's right.
So if we look at costs here, we've really been paying close attention to costs. Right now, we're estimating the cost to be about $55,000 a mile. If you look a year and a half ago, that was about $45,000 a mile. So inflation is impacting this. We looked at the miles in the state. We're allowing 20% for overbuild. By the way, the CUDs, if you look at the towns throughout the state, the towns all have cable in their central core. Most towns have cable in their central core. And so in order to get to the underserved and unserved, we actually have to run through cabled areas. So we're allowing incidental overbuild, and we estimate that to be about 20%. So if you look at all the costs here, we're somewhere between 558 to 606 million is what we're estimating to be the cost of these projects. So again, I can't reiterate this enough, because I know this is a lot of money. But if you look, I'll remind people of the value of our electric utility system is well over $1 billion in the state. So when you're talking about building a system, it makes sense that that it's going to cost a lot. But again, the more borrowing we do, the higher the consumer prices are going to be. And the grants help drive that down. So I rifled through that. It's time for questions.
Okay, committee. And Christine, can you take your screen down and then I can see the committee? Okay, there you are. Christine, thank you. I think this is one of the most upbeat, not hedging on the issues, but the amount of progress that's happened since we went home, I can't imagine we could have done more. So thank you and your whole team for work. And I see Senator Bray and then Senator Brock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you again, Ms. Halquist. The question I have on two different separate things. One is on cost. To what degree does the build out of internet going to relieve other costs in terms of being able to move telephone service onto this same infrastructure and perhaps move, streaming video or whatever it is, what we would call TV in the old days, watch your TV over the internet. I haven't ever had cable and I've seen an awful lot of programming just via the internet. So can you say something about how that may work out? If there's savings, you were mentioning, for instance, if it's $120 a home, we're going to leave a lot of people out. But I'm wondering how many existing subscriptions people have for telephone and cable, for instance, that might be droppable and then replaced by this.
Well, once you get fiber optic, fiber optic connection, you have tremendous bandwidth. So if all of the CUDs are doing what's called voice over IP, which allows telephone service. And, I'll use me as an example, being kind of a nerd for life, but, I wouldn't even think of contracting with a TV subscriber network because all of that's available, except I want a caveat here. I'm not a sports buff. So the sports folks remind me that there, some of these sports football games or these other things people watch, they may be stuck with their existing service for now, but it's evolving. I don't use a copper phone line, and I wouldn't think of paying for a television service. So there are significant savings to be had if you look at your entire telecommunications budget. Now that's got to remember when we think about an entire telecommunications budget, I'm looking at it from a perspective of somebody who's relatively secure financially. I'm not sure what that means for somebody who's living on the margins. They may not have the liberty to have all these other expenses. So this may be in addition to that.
Okay. And the second question is around workforce. So can you say something about, for instance, an apprenticeship, but you also need 144 hours of classroom or whatever. So can you get this training while you're an apprentice? In other words, do you have to go to school first, maybe on your own nickel and time, in order to then become an apprentice, or can you be earning while learning as an apprentice?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's very important because the programs we're putting together are earn to learn programs. If we're targeting low income or no income folks, they can't afford to lose their income. What I've learned through this process is the entry challenges for somebody low income to move jobs is really challenging because they can't afford. They don't have the flexibility in their finances to lose money. So we're working on what's called a pay it forward program. We're working with an organization called Social Finance out of Boston. And the idea is that you go through your training. It will take somebody who may be at a $15 an hour job, move them to a $40 an hour job. And maybe for the first 5 years, they're only getting $35 an hour because they're paying back the costs of the program when they enter it, which includes the wraparound services and the pay. The employers are also a part of this. I'm saying worst case, the employee would have to pay this, but they're making so much more money. So we are working on pay it forward and earn to learn programs. When I talk about 144 hours of training, only 2 weeks of that is classroom training. The other hours are online training that can be done within the flexibility of the participants' hours. So yes, they will get paid. That's the short answer.
Great. And then you just use some sample figures. Are those representative figures? Because
Yes,
$40 an hour is a good wage in Vermont.
yeah, $40 an hour is the national average for a fiber optic technician.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senator Brock.
Oh, I have 1,000 questions, but many of which Director Hallquist has answered, certainly in participation with the Joint IT Oversight Committee this summer. It's very helpful and certainly kept us all up to date on what was going on. So I'm very grateful for that. Let me go to kind of the big question at the end. You know, we created the Community Broadband Board in order to extend broadband to those areas that are unserved or underserved throughout Vermont. Based on what you've seen this summer in terms of getting things up and running, when are you going to be finished?
We're working aggressively to get that last Vermonter connected in 5 years. So it will take 5 years, we believe. Now, it's in all of our interests, and you know, that's what I think you're holding me and the VCBB accountable for, is to meet those schedules. And I think that it's really, we're putting the reporting system in place to carefully manage this project schedule. Because if you don't manage it, it'll get away from you. So you've asked the most important question, because delay is cost. So I can't say enough about how important it is that we set a schedule and maintain that schedule.
One of our biggest challenges, of course, is not just the unserved and underserved, but those that are currently served by other providers right now, but that are not at the 100/100 target that we've set in our goals. I know you'll have some overbuilding that you've already indicated that will touch some of those areas, but do you have any thoughts about how we will get everybody up to that 100/100 standard using what you're doing as a core?
Yeah, and let me just say, you know, first of all, let me go back to that schedule again. It's, you know, I probably don't need to reiterate it, but there's going to be tremendous challenge in meeting that schedule. So and I think that's our work, and we'll work closely with that. But as far as getting everybody else connected, here's, you know, I can't get too specific because I've had confidential discussions with larger providers, but I will talk about the business case. Wherever cable runs today, and this comes from, I'll just speak to my experience nationally working with the National Rural Electric Power Association. We know that if you overbuild cable with fiber, people over a 10-year period will all switch away from cable because of the superior performance of fiber optic. We also know that if it's 20 passings or 20 addresses per mile or more, that there already is a business case, and the private telecom providers will attack that case. So what I'm going to tell you here is that wherever there's cable today, it will get overbuilt with fiber. And I do, you know, you've seen some of the consolidated trucks running around, right? You know that Consolidated is on this. You know that Tilson is on this. You know there are companies on this. So we're being careful actually to not do too much overbuild of cable right now, because of the fact that the market is going to take care of this problem.
Okay. Senator Sorokin, you came back in time to ask your question.
Yeah, I missed an answer that I wanted to hear, but had a little problem this morning with my computer. Thank you, Christine. I am interested in the issue of affordability, and my recollection is we did not highlight affordability in last year's bill, but you've talked about it a lot in the context of trying to build a system at an affordable price and relying upon grants to a large extent, but you haven't talked about any subsidy programs or the like. And I do have concern that we provide for an affordable service at the end, and we need to plan for that now as opposed to waiting for the build out. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, there's so first of all, we're trying to drive that entry cost as low as possible. So I'm going to use some examples, but these are for only example only. You know, our goal would be to if we can get the cost of entry down to $50 a month. The FCC has a program. It's a new term. It's ACT. But it used to be called anyway, it's a $30 a month subsidy that the FCC will provide. And we've been talking about this at the National Broadband Association, the State Broadband Leaders Network. This program has been around for a while where the FCC will pay $30 a month. It's now been put in place permanently by Congress. It's called the Affordable Connectivity Program. But it doesn't have a lot of penetration nationwide, only 3 or 4%. You know, so that we're working very closely with the CUDs and a not-for-profit organization to be the focus for the state to make sure that every single low-income person has the opportunity to participate in this program. And I think it's like 200% of the poverty level, but don't quote me. It's not like half the poverty level. So it's accessible to low-income folks. So, you know, if we can get that delta as low as possible, then the cost, then we've worked the affordability issue. So, and we even have some examples where, you know, maybe we can even drive it down to 0. But that's our strategy, is get the cost of entry as low as possible and then take advantage of the affordable connectivity program.
Okay. Christine, is that nonprofit group you're working on the one that Holly Grosvenor and folks talked to us about last year? Okay, and we declined.
Yeah, I don't want to overcommit for them because we just started the discussion, but
okay.
Yes,
I know they had talked to us, and last year we just didn't get around to deciding if we were going to fund them. But they're doing the door-to-door kind of outreach. And I think you did give us a slide and we did hear from EC Fiber last year that they are so heavily leveraged, they are not for profits, that they do not have the ability to do the really affordable rates because they have debt and they have to pay that off first.
Yes, and we're in discussions with them how we can mitigate that, because you don't want to penalize them for being the first one in, right? They really set the model.
And I think what you gave us in your chart, though, was the more we leave to debt, the harder it is for any of these folks to have the financing to do an affordability. The more it costs the consumer, because he got to pay the debt. The more we can do in grants, then that lowers the cost, the final cost to the consumer, because you're not paying off the debt plus significant interest. So the message I got was, as much as you can, the most we can do, other than put cash into, you know, an affordability program, is to be very cognizant and do as many grants as possible.
Yes, and there's another component of this too that we will address, that we are addressing, and that is the bulk cost of data coming into Vermont. You know, we need to be as competitive as possible with Boston and New York in terms of what we pay for bulk data, because again, it's looking at all the costs.
You're beyond my pay grade, which is perfectly good. You wouldn't want anyone at my pay grade developing broadband, which is why we have you. Okay, so that is buying the service to come in, and I gather there is a volume.
Right, volume discounts.
The more they can shove in here, the less it costs per unit.
So So
And that, Senator Sirotkin.
we don't need to go too granular here, but not sure I heard a lot in the way of specifics that the legislature might be thinking about doing to anticipate an affordability gap. What specifically would you ask us to do, and are other states or anybody dealing with it other than trying to keep your development costs low and trying to rely upon this $30 that the feds are giving? It sounds like we're likely to have a problem. So what can we do now to anticipate that problem?
We have a problem now.
Well, we do. If you look, and I'm hoping that we can get, the organization, I think it's Broadband Equality for All. Anyway, I was talking to FX yesterday. They've got 50 participants. They've got a model, and even though we're, I said, what is it going to take to go from 50 to 5,000, right? This model, we have an organization in place that we should support. If you look at providing, I'll call it the equity component of the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program. The equity component is the idea is you've got people who haven't been on the internet that we need to provide the training and the tools to, and it's really specific. So you can't ask for your community action organizations to do this. You really need someone who has the technical and the low income experience. So if that's not successful, then we're going to need to recreate that somehow, and we'll come back to you on that. There's also, when I talked about the towns, laying conduit, we're going to work with the Agency of Transportation. We're going to work with the utilities. Whenever the ground's dug up, we need to be laying conduit. That's a significant savings. And, Vermonters know how to dig things. So, we're going to try to work with recruit as many folks in towns as possible to dig those ditches and lay that conduit. Because that's first, you put it in the ground, it's a lot safer. And you put it in the ground and you save $8,000 a mile, roughly, an estimate of 8,000 miles for make ready. So I'm not asking, I don't think it's premature to ask the legislature for anything specific, because I think we've got the plans in place. But we will come back, and we'll probably be able to give you some better answers come late February, early March as well.
Okay, we will definitely have you back for an update. I've got Senator Pearson's hand and then Senator Hardy. Senator Pearson, are you with us?
Yeah, yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Christine, thank you. This is great. I want to go back to workforce. Two questions. Because we are, as you said, sort of maybe a year ahead of a lot of other states tackling this problem, have you considered, or might there be an opportunity to sort of use our timeline to say to other states, hey, send us your workforce, we'll get them, we'll help you get them trained, and sort of a partnership along those lines. And kind of in a related question, is there an entrepreneurial opportunity for somebody to set up in Vermont, help us with our project, and then also be, developing the traveling telecom technicians for the next decade, which, presumably could be pretty lucrative all across the country. I don't think there's any place that doesn't need some level of this assistance. So it's kind of a two-part question, but they're related. I'd appreciate any thoughts you've had about this.
Well, I haven't thought about that bi-directional component of the labor, which I think is a really good thought. The idea is train here and we'll provide there. And yes, of course, there's an entrepreneurial opportunity. It's the the existing construction workforces are pretty much, being consumed by Consolidated, right? So yes, there's absolutely an opportunity here, and I'm certainly happy to talk with anybody that's willing to look at that.
Okay. Because Christine, we've got jobs now, but if we rush and train a whole lot of people, which sounds like a really good idea, but we're going to be done build out in 5 years. I'm sure we're going to need some tech. Are they qualified to do anything else electrical, or is it strictly laying cable on lines? And it's hard to get somebody to sign up for what could be a good 5 years and then it's gone.
Yeah, you ask a very other important question, an important element of the program, because that's part of encouraging people to leave their existing jobs is answering those questions. So we're working with with VTC. We're working with the Department of Labor to turn these into career paths. This is a great entry path for IT jobs as well as electrical line workers. The electrical line workers are paid very well, and you look at our electrical line workers today. I think the national average is they're starting at like $80,000 a year, with overtime. I remember Vermont Electric Co-op, 16 of the 20 highest paid people in the company were the line workers, because they deserve it, so they're out there in the rough weather and all that, but it's a really great profession.
I wouldn't have want to been up on those poles in the sub-zero weather last
No,
year.
I wouldn't either. So, but there are people who love that.
Yeah. Okay. Sandra Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Christine, for this optimistic report. It's really great after all the work this committee did last year, and there were days when I just did not think we were going to get it done. So it's really nice to hear this report. I also appreciated when you mentioned the town ARPA funds, that you acknowledge that towns have other needs that may be in addition to broadband. The CUD in my area has been very aggressive in pursuing the towns for their ARPA money, which I totally appreciate and understand. But I want to make sure that the CUDs know that towns have other needs as well, and respect that, that they may want to split it up and use it for different things. But my question to you after that is, did you make a budget request? What is in the governor's budget for broadband, and what is the broadband board's request for additional funding for FY23?
Yeah, so we've worked with the governor's office, and what the governor put in his announcement was 95 million out of the ARPA funds for 2022, and 100 million out of the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the BETA program, which is the 2023 program.
So 195 million total for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Christine, I guess that's part of where I'm still visualizing, because ARPA funds came in. We haven't had joint fiscal have to meet and agree to accept anymore. So we've got our 11 billion. And there's a lot of churn. We dedicated a lot of it, we thought most of it last year, but a lot of it. And now we're starting to move stuff around as some things get used and some don't. So you're getting ARPA funds. We've heard, and it's not Build Back Better, it's the infrastructure bill is coming. I'm not sure what that's titled.
Yeah, that was the BEAD. I should call it the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Everything is a Jobs Act. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the money we're into using now, right? Or that's what your next slug is going to come from. Is the new
the next slug comes from the IIJA.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the 2022 comes from ARPA,
Okay, so is
Yeah.
there a matching requirement with this?
Yes, there is a matching requirement, but it can be matched with ARPA funds. So the
Okay,
IIJA requires a 25% match. However, our plan is to use ARPA funds to do that match. And that, which is
Okay.
accepted.
okay, so of your 92, you're going to have to match 100 and something. So basically, that's what you've got to work with. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
now I'll add a reminder too that, if you look at, I just want to add something about the jobs. There are also going to be quite a few existing jobs just maintaining the infrastructure. But
Oh, yeah.
if you look at, I would encourage the legislature, this goes back to my own campaign for governor back in 2018. This is so important for economic development in Vermont, so it's around, I worry that, about where, the more revenue we have, the more income that comes in the state, the more revenue the state has to work with. So this is really building our future.
Right.
Now, that future, that future is not without problems, right? So if we're successful, and my dream is that we get let's put it this way. Right now, Vermont is 25th in the nation, 25th or 26th, depending where you look, in terms of broadband. The United States is 10th in the world. We get everybody connected, we're going to be number one in the world. We're going to be a very desirable place to live. So that brings in, high intellectual margin jobs, and so that's a good thing, right? But from the COVID crisis perspective, what we saw happen to housing costs, that's the other consideration that needs to be
Oh,
thought
yeah.
about. But we certainly are doing this for beyond today's problems. We're doing this to build an economic future for the state of Vermont.
But we do need to build some affordable housing
Housing, that's right.
for
Yeah.
people making $80,000 a year. So, okay, Senator Bray.
I should follow up offline with Ms. Halquist on this one about, in natural resources and energy, we're having a parallel conversation about developing a green building trades workforce, something bigger than just weatherization. Same conversation, really. There's a career, there's opportunity, there's better wages. And in this case, actually, these jobs won't go away because we have a deep backlog of work to do. So I'd love to follow up with you. There's one other tangent, I'll just mention it, that the one challenge that comes with having broadband everywhere is we worry some about watching green Vermont get turned into suburban Vermont, as people say, oh, I want to move to the green mountain state and build my house on 20 acres. And so we're seeing development pressures that we haven't seen. And there's going to be the climate side of it. And then there's you can work from anywhere in the world if you have good broadband side of it. So it's a good problem to have that we have, if we have great broadband everywhere. But I think we're conscious that we need to be thinking for the long haul in the committee, because it really could be a significant change for our state.
Okay.
Agreed. That's and of course, again, look at it as an opportunity, but again, that gets into the role of government and the role of regulation, and dense urban housing. Vermont, Burlington's even, I even spoke at one point in Burlington about this limitation on 7-story construction. We have to reconsider some of these things from an environmental and land use perspective. We have to reconsider some of our values and what our urban centers look like.
Mm-hmm. So I'll have to send, I think I can send it. It was a pop-up news thing about a tendency they're seeing in Virginia and around Washington, D.C., where they've done really compact zoning and people are buying small, Massachusetts, we call them shoe factory houses, bungalows, and they are building McMansions. And the picture is of the McMansion and then the bungalow on the next lot. And you're getting some infill that wasn't quite what people anticipated the infill would be. So we just cautionary as we move forward on compact zoning. Okay, other questions for Christine?
Yeah, let me just add, if you don't mind, I'm going to add one thing about affordability. You know, and this comes from my previous job as well. You know, one of the things is looking at income, but the other thing is looking at affordability. And, you know, if I look at the Northeast Kingdom, you look at the Northeast Kingdom wages, it doesn't look too bad. But as soon as you overlay energy density or energy costs, it really looks stark. So, and it kind of ties with this discussion of how we manage growth, right? You know, that's why is it so expensive to live in the Northeast Kingdom? Well, part of the reason is you're driving so far.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are all, they're all intertwined, but
right. Yeah. If you've got to drive to Barry or St. Johnsbury to work or Montpelier, it gets pretty expensive at gas prices. But so far, maybe we can get a biochar plant up there. Senator Pearson.
Thank you. One other question that you've reminded me, I've been wondering about, and maybe you're not the right person to ask, but we had understood that Washington Electric was going to get in the business of trying to bring fiber to its customers, and I wonder if you have any sense of whether or not that's happening, or should we look to them directly to get an update? I'm just curious.
Well, I would encourage you to get an update, but we are actively involved. In fact, I talked to Lewis Porter at 8 a.m. this morning about that project. We're, from the VCB perspective, we're very interested in that project because, again, from an affordability standpoint, it helps. They're able to get RUS funding at a low interest rate, but even more importantly, they can pay back over 25 years. You know, if you look at VITA is looking at 15-year payback. So you look at the monthly cost for debt service on that, it's so low that we are really encouraging the 3 CUDs, and I have an action item to set up a meeting with those 3 CUDs to keep this moving. But yes, it's very important. You know, I think we all ought to encourage WEC to keep moving forward because part of their, you know, their main goal is to get a fiber tube throughout their whole system. If you think about, and this ties to the whole energy issues, right? Smart grid and those kind of things. You know, they can get connected to every one of their members with fiber. Now they have a system that's potentially powerful for helping in terms of, you know, reducing our carbon footprint through managing the energy use of the customer side.
Okay. Senator Brock.
You mentioned indirectly some of these things, but I'd like to just get a sense for what do you want us to do this session that might help and facilitate your work. For example, one of the things I noticed was the potential impact of what we passed last year that places the state in the first position in the event of a CUD failure, and the impact of that on the CUD's ability to borrow in the bond market. And perhaps that would be one of the things that we could look at and see, is there an alternative that could protect the state on the one hand, but at the same time ease the ability of the CUD to go to the bond market on the other. Is there anything else that you think we should deal with?
You know, we've gone through this very carefully at our board level, and we think the bill is very workable. So that is the most important thing to address. That's really the only request we're coming to the legislature with, is to change that language. We think we have the ability to work the other issues that are coming up. And, you know, we really want to give this time to, you know, it would be premature for me to say that we need to make any changes, because I think the board has enough liberty to address the issues that are coming up.
Well, one of the things that is in a bill that's pending in the committee right now is a change in the statutory goal of the date by which we should be at 100, because it's probably unlikely that we're going to have that done within the time frame contained in current law. As you look at the overall goals that we have as a state for broadband, aside from modifying that date, is there anything there that you think may be problematic in terms of those goals?
No, I think it's really good to change that date because we aren't going to make it by end of 2024. Now, the caveat, and I appreciate setting these goals, and we talked about that date at our board level. Ultimately, when we talk about getting every Vermonter connected, there are going to be exceptions, we think. It's premature for me to say there'll be exceptions, but if you think about the person living off grid, a mile off any dirt road, that could be a problem. But, overall, we're supportive of that change of that date. But we really don't see anything else that needs to necessarily be changed.
Okay. I think I'm in shock. I can't remember the last time we were told we actually got things right. And when we were slogging through this at 9 o'clock at night, the end last year, I don't know that any of us were sure. So thank you, Christine. You've, I think, made our vision a reality. We've got a ways to go. We did just, now the real work does begin. And the big one, I've got that change and we'll work to make that work. The other big one is how we do the employment and training and outreach, and maybe some of those folks that are logging might like to do line work, and how do we reach out to them? And the affordability issue is back on our plate. And we can keep working on that. So we are actually over time. We have a break until 2:45, but that is it for the rest of the afternoon. We've got a couple more energy bills to go through. This is Energy Day, and I will see you all at 2:45.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
for all
you,
your work.
Christine. This is
Thank you.
uplifting. Okay, Faith, you can take us off live. Ending